My, oh my, look what we have here. Week 0 of college football, and just like that, officially, there will be football every single weekend for the rest of the 2023 calendar year. Life is good. And so, friends, listeners, content consumers, to you I say, welcome to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan writer for The Free. I'm joined by my colleague, Big Ten insider Rainer Sabin. And Rainer, we did it, bud. We're here. How you doing?
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to doing this project with you, and looking forward to this upcoming football season. Should be fun and exciting, and who knows what's in store for us.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it as well. And it's episode 1. So for the people coming on this journey with us, allow me, if you will, to present some background. We, the Free Press Sports Department, have a number of podcasts. There's Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, Pistons Pulse with Omari Sankofa, Days of Roar with Evan Petzold, and also under that Gannett umbrella, we have Spartan Speak with the Freeps Chris Solari. So that's all to say, Rainer, you and I also wanted a forum where we could talk about sports too, which maybe we thought would be no problem. And so all we had to do to make it happen was 4 months of planning, meet with executive editor Anjanette Delgado, lead sports editor Kirkland Crawford, audio engineer Robin Chance, social media director Brian Manzullo, another one of our sports editors and who is the producer of this podcast, who's with us right now, Andrew Burkle, get marketing involved, photo involved, promotions involved, and of course, get it all cleared by our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols. So there you have it, nothing to it.
Yeah, it took some heavy lifting to get to this point, but we're here in just in time for the football season. With Michigan at peak Harbaugh, the Wolverines are ranked number 2 and have a serious shot at claiming their first natty since 1997.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we've known that Michigan is going to be really, really good this season for quite some time. And so we wanted to document it from the beginning of the season to that final day and potentially the big game for all the marbles. So it's what's led to the birth of this pod that we've discussed, as you've heard, the concept since this spring. And the main reason we wanted to do it was just to have another way to talk about football, a place to do those deep dives that podcasting allows for, that maybe print does not allow us to get to, just meet our audience in a new space. And so I had a lot of thoughts, Rainer, when I thought about what this first episode would look like. And I figured it would be about setting the stage for exactly that, this chase for a national championship. But right now we need to make the main thing the main thing. And clearly that's Jim Harbaugh's 3-game suspension. So again, maybe not the ideal way we wanted to start this new podcast or the way we envisioned this championship season. But as we say when covering this program, Rainer, it's always something.
It is always something. I mean, the whole Harbaugh saga has kind of played out this entire offseason from January up until now. And so here we are, right up against the first game of the season. And, there's still questions about Harbaugh's future. And even with this, suspension now happening, there's still other questions lurking beyond, this matter and still unresolved aspects of this situation. So it's going to continue to play out in different ways, but at least there's some kind of resolution to this point as far as Harbaugh's status.
That is a good word for it. I mean, it's not done. There's no finality to it, but we understand at least with all the ebbs and flows this thing has taken, not just in the last 3 weeks, not just since Michigan received the draft notice of allegations back in January, but this started years ago during the COVID season. And so, Rainer, the way we're going to handle this for the people is we're going to do a couple different blocks. So in this first block, we like to call it sort of 3 things, or our main 3 thoughts from the latest developments around Michigan football in this week. That's all Harbaugh. So first, main point, what happened? Let's break down the timeline. 2, what does it mean for this season? And 3, what does it mean for the future? Then after we get after the break, or once we get back after the break, that's when we get to football and national. I mean, this feels like the national championship season, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we'll get into that. Why? I mean, we're not the first people to declare Michigan. And I don't know if you're declaring it. We'll see. I'd love to actually get your thought on how far you think Michigan goes, but we would be far from the first to think Michigan will win a national championship in a preseason, right? That kind of happens around here a little bit from time to time. But this year we think is very, very different, right? So we'll get into that. And then at the end, we're workshopping the name, but I think Stadium in Maine, or the sounds of Stadium in Maine, just an idea to bring people into what we are hearing around the program, whether that be from the fan base, the players, the coaches, and just sort of talks that are in the ether, circling in the ether. Does that all sound good to you, Rainer?
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. And it should be an interesting episode and hopefully the first of many.
I wonder what would have happened. What if you had said no? Like that's not the way I want to handle this. I guess I didn't really leave you much option.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Either way, here we go. So Rainer, I have been covering this program since last year. You for 4 years now. In case I already don't make you feel old enough, there you go. You're older than me again. So can you please, for the people, set this up for us as best you can, and as concisely as we can? Jim Harbaugh, the suspension, the NCAA investigation, level 1, level 2, why it started, and how we got to here.
Well, the genesis of the investigation, stems from the COVID-19 year. Obviously some violations occurred, whether it was impermissible recruiting activities or impermissible coaching activities where they had extra coaches providing instruction. Michigan got a draft notice of allegations in January. There was that was at the time that Harbaugh was exploring possibly going to the NFL, and there was rumors about a contract extension possibly in the works. That seemed to get tabled as a result of this NCAA investigation. Anyway, flash forward to the summer, we get a report out there that Harbaugh will be suspended the first 4 games, and that it was part of a negotiated resolution, which is the preferred way that the NCAA typically likes to deal with these matters. They like cooperation because they can't police all the institutions. And so it's a lot of self-reported aspects of what, the NCAA would prefer, how the process plays out, where the school takes it on themselves to kind of administer their own punishment. Anyway, get to that point, and then the deal's off with the negotiated resolution because the Committee on Infraction rejects it. And so that leads to Monday, where Michigan decides to impose its own 3-game ban on Harbaugh. But, he's going to be able to coach the team during the week. And, it's somewhat of a strange situation, but it seems to me that, Michigan's trying to mitigate the severity of the punishment, maybe play it out, have some of it incurred during this year, and then maybe have some of it incurred next year if that's indeed what the NCAA decides as far as the ultimate resolution. I mean, I guess there's an aspect of time served here where Michigan is trying to get out in front of it and hopefully mitigate the penalty. So that's where we stand right now.
Yeah, and for Michigan, for Jim Harbaugh, there are maybe different goals, right? That you want to get to,
sure,
depending on what the future on what the future holds. And I guess for when you take a step back and look at this at the big picture, and you're talking about how the NCAA prefers to do things and self-reporting, self-policing, because there is just so much to cover, and really the NCAA is in over its head in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
when it comes to handing down these punishments, that's why in circles around the program, and someone who I spoke with when I was getting sort of the information, just sort of the background information about how this is all breaking down, it's why the main word is just sort of everyone's just frustrated, right? Everybody is very frustrated with this process because they say, hey, look, there are worse things happening elsewhere and that have been self-reported. I mean, Tennessee, like dozens and dozens of level 2 violations. We have 4, and other schools with level 1 violations. We have 1. But as we've said, in the line that sort of keeps coming up with this is often the cover-up is greater than the crime. Mm-hmm. And that's what the level 1 situation was with Jim Harbaugh when they came asking about those level 2 questions or those level 2 allegations. He denied it. And now correct me if I'm wrong, the way I'm reading into this, Reiner, by Michigan self-imposing this 3-game suspension and the way Ward Manuel worded his letter, it was their way of, this is their first sort of public acknowledgement as an institution that, yes, these level 2 violations did occur. Am I understanding that?
Yes, and and possibly the level 1. I mean, the idea that Harbaugh would be suspended for that many games for just level 2 violations, I don't think would happen. There's some, with the level 1, misleading or not cooperating with the investigators. I mean, that's the stiffest penalty, not the level 2 violations, which again would have probably had some very minor penalties attached to it. So, I mean, it's an interesting situation where, again, a lot of people think, let the process play out. But again, Michigan potentially puts themselves in harm's way, in a much deeper harm's way, if they do let the process play out without being proactive and administering some level of punishment.
Right. But then the question becomes, Reiner, as we've known, and I want to make it clear, it's not like sometimes there's the difference between a report and a rumor, right? This was not just some rumor that the NCAA and Jim Harbaugh in Michigan had agreed to a 4-game suspension. I mean, this was very much in agreement, and it fell apart, right? This was not just some, I heard. So the question then becomes, if the NCAA had liked the idea of 4 games, if Michigan is going to self-impose, I'm still trying to figure out, and I have yet to get a good answer, why do the 3 games? And I know we're supposed to be providing the answers, but I don't know that there is one, because yes, it is showing, and here's what I was told. As I ask you a question, then answer it myself. Very well done, Tommy. So what I was told is that 25% of the schedule is sort of the norm in comparable situations, right? In similar situations. Now, every investigation is very individual, but with infractions of this level, of this quantity, 25% is sort of standard practice how the NCAA has accepted it. But this is not a standard practice situation. The Committee on Infractions just did not, in the final minutes, accept 4 games. So I'm unsure why 3 games would then be enough. Now, Michigan doesn't want to just suspend Jim Harbaugh for 6 games, but I don't know if 4 wasn't enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my math says 3 is less than 4. So I have a hard time seeing how the NCAA sees this as fully an acceptable level of self-policing.
No, I don't know if they will, and again, they could tack on more punishment, but how much more? I mean, is it going to be 3 games next year? Do they go back just for the 1, which was or 2, maybe 2 games next year? I mean, it's like
if it's if it's more than 1,
right?
It's Texas, right?
Yeah,
because Texas is game 2, so this is very different than this year.
Yes, exactly. But again, we'll see if some of the schedules could change again, because I mean, again, we don't know what the new schedule is going to look like for the Big Ten with with Oregon and Washington being added to it. That new schedule has not been released with those teams added. I mean, again, Texas is walking into the SEC I mean, who knows what's going to happen with as it relates to Michigan's 2024 schedule. So I mean, it's very hard to predict how this punishment is going to affect next year, if it is going to affect it at all.
Yeah. If I may very selfishly derail, I am super hoping that Texas game can get rescheduled, because my twin sister has decided to get married in Boston on September 7th next year. So, and which Kirk, by the way, I was going to ask for that off. It's a year in advance. So if our bosses are listening, this is actually how they're finding that out. But we'll handle that. There's a lot of, as Reiner just said, the schedule may change. But bringing it back to now, Reiner, what does it? I mean, all that matters now is what does it mean for this season, right? There are questions that can and will be answered down the line, but those can't be handled. The question is, how does this affect this year? I have my thought. I wanted to hear yours first.
I don't think it affects it much, obviously, from whether the team can perform well in these games. I mean, the opponents are not very good at all, and reflective of just a weak schedule in general for Michigan. So I don't think that it's going to affect the team. Now, the perception of what the season is, should Michigan win a national championship, I do think it affects that because it gives grist to the mill, as far as opposing fan bases are concerned, who can poke shots or, poke at Michigan for having a coach who was suspended for violating NCAA rules. And so I think it takes away from, Michigan's season in that sense. Should Michigan go on to win a national championship, people can say that it's just not a legit national championship. I mean, whether you believe that or you don't believe it, it still gives license to other fan bases to be able to take shots at Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I see that point of view, but I disagree, right? In the sense that, well, I guess I disagree. You're right. We know which fan bases are going to say that, but whether or not this happened, fan bases who don't like Michigan are going to say one thing or another, as all fan bases do about one another. And I'm just not sure how much this is not, I keep going back to it. They committed violations, but it was not so egregious that it tipped the scales of I mean, I guess to use a scandal from their own institution. This is not of Fab Five level, right? Like, far from it. And so I don't think it takes away from their winning. Now, I mean, I think it is an unfortunate aside, but it in my mind, in no way, shape, or form does it lessen a national championship if they want a national championship. No one will remember. I don't think people will be talking about this at that time.
Well, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I do think people will be talking about it because, I mean, how can you get around the fact that, Harbaugh was missing for the first 3 games of the season? And I think, people, are focused intensely on Harbaugh. And so Harbaugh is Michigan and Michigan is Harbaugh. So I think that, again, I think people are going to have the perception that, from the outside, and I'm talking about opposing fan bases, that, again, you had a coach there that was suspended, for violating NCAA rules, and lo and behold, you win a national championship. So maybe there's some correlation between the two things. I mean, where some of those violations may have led to it, even though that is really a very weak argument based on the facts that we know as far as what the violations were.
Yeah. No. And we don't need to, I guess, get into all of what this argument is going to be and what that argument is going to be. Although I did ask you the question how it matters. I
do think it's a shame, though, if that's the case. I mean, I think that's that's unfortunate for the players, and I think it's just a sad kind of reality. But it's just the way that things work in our society, where it's like. People are quick to cast, aspersions and make judgments based off of one little thing and extrapolate it to the whole program. Yeah,
I mean, guilty in the court of public opinion, right?
Yeah, right.
It's guilty before proven innocent, and so certainly there is that. But Michigan has done such a good job of keeping its own focus. Sure. I don't think if they finally get their national championship, they don't care what anyone says. I assure you. I'm very confident.
No doubt. I mean, if you win the national championship, I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And, Harbaugh, gets to, achieve something that, he's been looking for, whether it was, trying to win the Super Bowl when he was in the NFL or, win a national title here. I mean, he would, meet all the expectations that were set forth for him when he took the job in, December 2014. So it would be a crowning achievement for Harbaugh and for Michigan football in general.
Yeah. I would argue that Jim Harbaugh has already done what he set out to do at Michigan. Although that, I mean, of course, a national championship is already is the goal. But those first 6 years were, I mean, no one could in Michigan circles could have imagined it going that poorly. And yes, they got many 10-win seasons, but no actual wins of note, no bowl wins, splitting against Michigan State over those years when Michigan State was down and a lot of them, and not winning once against Ohio State, right? 0-5 in the first five, and then not playing that sixth year. And so everything looked horrible. If at that point you had said and known that Michigan was going to be at this spot right now with 2 wins over, having flipped the script on Ohio State, back on top of the Big Ten, I mean, I think he has done his job. However, the national championship would be, I mean, the national championship gets you the statue, right? That's how I see it. But win or lose, is he here next year? I mean, these things, while the players can put it aside and acts as if it is not part of the storyline, like you said, it is. And it will matter next year, and it will continue to matter until it's solved. So do you think that what happens on the field this year determines Harbaugh's future? I mean, and the investigation. What are your thoughts about how this investigation and Michigan suspension of Jim Harbaugh affects things beyond 2023?
Yeah, there's no certainty there. I mean, I think the relationship between Harbaugh and the athletic administration with Ward Manuel. I mean, it's been very, very strange, is how I would characterize it. I mean, he went and interviewed on National Signing Day in 2022 with the Vikings. Said he was, after that, fell through. He came back saying that it was a one-time thing and not happen again. Lo and behold, this past January, he goes and interviews with the Broncos and talks to the Carolina Panthers. And so kind of went back, and it seemed like there was very strange dynamic going on between where Harbaugh's, talking to Santaono, the university president, but he's not dealing with Ward Manuel. So it doesn't seem like things are on the same page. This situation is also weird. I mean, again, the athletic department sends out an email from Ward Manuel with a statement, but then Jim Harbaugh sends out his own statement through the Michigan football spokesman. So it's like they don't seem to be on the same page going, at all. And I think that dynamic is something to monitor. I mean, obviously with Harbaugh looking at the NFL the last couple of years, why wouldn't he look at it this year, especially if he does achieve, the ultimate goal of winning the national championship? Even if he doesn't, he may realize that, hey, it's never going to get better, so I might as well try my shot of really what I want to do, which is win a Super Bowl. I mean, he said that winning the Super Bowl is pretty much his main objective in his coaching career. So, I think he considers the NFL the kind of ultimate testing of coaching, which it really probably is. I mean, given the fact of the roster, equality across, and the roster balance across the league, and the salary cap structure and the socialized structure of the NFL, where again, there's not much differential between talent from one team to the next. So I mean, I think all of that is probably going to factor into the season.
Yeah,
and his decision. Yeah,
and the NCAA investigation, to put a bow on this as best we can, I think does not do any favors for those who want to see him in Ann Arbor long term, because I mean, just Jim Harbaugh likes to do things Jim Harbaugh's way, and as we all know, and abiding by the rules of a hearing and the timeline and everything that comes along with that, while having to simultaneously recruit and tell all the parents, and which maybe he's right, and I'm not saying maybe he's telling the truth as if he would lie, but I'm saying maybe everything he says comes to fruition. This is no big deal. The NCAA is full of it. They're just trying to make an example of me. Talk to anyone in our program. They know we do things the right way. Like, maybe he can still give that pitch. It's pretty exhausting. He's been doing it for a while, and like you just said, he know everyone. I mean, he knows where he wants to go. It's public knowledge where he wants to go. I was just talking to someone on Monday when all this news broke, who said like, I mean, there is talks. I mean, this is an exaggeration, but the line they said was, "Is he going to be Michigan's Pete Carroll?" And now Pete Carroll sanctions, I mean, things have got really spiraled out of control and gotten out of hand at USC. And I'm not making that comparison, but the level of comparison I'm making is a coach with very high acumen who had gotten a prestigious program up to the top of football. And then there is some NCAA investigation background going on, and you don't want to deal with it. So you go to the NFL to try to win your ultimate prize. There are a lot of parallels there. And
well, and
me.
I think the dynamic with Ward Manuel is very fascinating. And, don't forget, Manuel gave him the pay cut following the 2020 disaster season when they went 2-4. And I mean, I that was a big motivator for why Harbaugh was exploring the NFL. And I think he was pretty embittered by that whole situation. So when he, went, an interview with the Vikings, I think that was part of the reason. And I think that's, hung over everything since then is that pay cut. And then you add in the fact that the administration's also basically suspending him for 3 games. It becomes a situation where, is he going to be upset enough at, Michigan to overtake his, warm feelings for his alma mater that, he once had and such. I mean, now I think it's, in his eyes, it's probably pretty much all business from this point forward.
I mean, that's what he said. I mean, he joked, my wife asked me, like, I know you wrote about it. My wife gave me a honeydew list.
Right.
And I can't even focus on it because it's just all football. And so, I mean, that's the way he's handling it. That's the way they're all going to handle it. Quickly, we did not touch on this in part 2 as we put a bow on it. Your prediction, who gets the interim tag?
I think that it could be possible. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be one person that gets it. So I'm going to go with multiple people who are going to have the ability to the coach. I don't think it really matters, especially considering that Harbaugh is going to be there during the week. So everything should probably work pretty seamlessly on game day, regardless of who it is. So, I mean, it could be anybody from, Jesse Minter, as you outlined in your article, exploring the candidates. I mean, pretty much any one of these people could probably do the job. So whether it's, Jesse Minter or Steve Clinkscale or Mike Hart or Sharon Moore, I mean, it's Jay Harbaugh. I mean, it could be anyone. And they would all have, an ability or, enough knowledge to be able to probably carry forth the job in that 3.5 hour window.
This Harbaugh calls it the license and ability to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
I think this is a perfect opportunity for them to try out Sharon Moore. Obviously, everything's going to go seamlessly. They're going to win all these games by 50 points. And if Harbaugh is leaving, I would think if Michigan went internal for a full-time head coaching candidate, it's my understanding that Sharon Moore is at the top of that list right now. And so the reason they would not have done this initially with the 4-game suspension in my mind is Sharon Moore and Grant Newsom, the tight ends coach, were both to be suspended for 1 game. It would be very awkward, even more awkward than it already is, to appoint someone for 1 week, then Sharon come back and give it to him the next 3 weeks. So I would have seen him just giving it to a Minter or someone else all 4 weeks. But now that, Go ahead.
No, I think, if you're going to, hold Harbaugh to his Michigan method, why not, have them all out, and have them all play it out,
Oh my God.
Again, it's like you let it play out, how do you determine the best players? You let them play, how do you determine the best coaches? You let them coach. So, I think, if you're going to hold him to the Michigan method and what he likes to do, it could be just like the McCarthy-McNamara situation last year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Could you imagine that, like when they appoint, like it's Jay Harbaugh's quarter, and he's just and Tommy Doman is running fake punts and throwing it downfield to gunners, and just everyone is just like putting their own unit on shine. When Sharon is the coach, he actually does the 10 offensive linemen and 1 running back, like all these things we've heard the coaches talk about.
It would
Ron Bellamy finally gets a wide receiver involved. You see a pass downfield.
It would be interesting if they did it that way. But I mean, yeah, again, they could do that with, the individual coaches week to week. And, it wouldn't be a bad way for them to, test out how the team responds to each of these individuals. If they wanted to go, say, Harbaugh, this does prepare for the event that Harbaugh does leave, they have at least somewhat of a guidepost, to determine whether they want to fill it internally.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right. That was a great place to leave it. And the reason they have so many coaches who can fill in is sort of going to lead us into this next thought, which is one reason why we think this is the championship window. It's just another spot they have depth on the other side of the break. Is it championship or bust? We'll be right back with Hail Yes. And as promised, we're back. All right, Rainer, football season's here. We have been talking about this season, the way things have lined up for so long. Blake Corum said the line, championship or bust. You asked Jim Harbaugh about it. He said, I don't know who's saying that. I haven't heard that inside this program. And then you and I turned to each other. This was in Indianapolis. We're like, that's funny because 20 feet over there, Tony, asked Blake just to sort of clarify. And what he meant was he doesn't mean like they're failures, they're horrible, everything's doom and gloom. But like, look, we have everything we need to win a national championship. If we don't, that's coming up short of what we can achieve. And what Harbaugh said is, what does bust mean? So, Rainer, do you know what bust means? And is this championship or bust?
I mean, it is championship or bust, and the players have said so internally, regardless of what, Jim says as far as that's concerned. When Josh Wallace came for his visit, prior to committing to Michigan, the new cornerback from UMass, the players told him that, they viewed it as championship or bust. I mean, that's what they were articulating to him, and in a lot of ways it is because again, Jim Harbaugh has talked about the fact that 20 players possibly could be drafted off this roster in April, when the draft hits Detroit, and so it's it could be a big day for Michigan in April. So in theory, it should be a big day possibly for Michigan, and come January, assuming they get to that point, as far as the college football playoff is concerned. And so, yeah, everything is pointing towards them getting back to the college football playoff and going that extra step or two to get to that national championship game and, possibly win it. And, anything short of that would be seen as a disappointment. Now, is it a bust in the sense that, they're a complete failure? No, but I don't think, Michigan fans will love the idea that they, have fallen short again when they had the roster in as good of a shape that it's been in probably, at least 2 decades.
Right. And so two thoughts. One, on Josh Wallace, I think you need to specify, Rainer, when he met with those players and they were telling him and mapping out the importance of this championship season, he was at some restaurant. He said, I don't know. We said, we asked, where were you? He's like, some restaurant on Main Street. I think it's called Chop House. It's pretty good place. He was eating Wagyu steak. That is the way to sell a recruit, or to sell a potential transfer. Get him some Wagyu. Are we allowed to mention the Chop House? I don't know. That was there. We're not promoting it. That's what they said. So that's one. But you mentioned it. 20. I mean, Jim Harbaugh likes to speak with hyperbole. He said Alex Orji might be their second or third string quarterback, could be the best kick returner ever. So things he says must be taken with a grain of salt. Sure. However, 20 potential NFL draft picks is actually not that much of an exaggeration, right? Like it could be mid-teens, upper teens, and depends who wants to declare. I mean, you could have half a dozen on the offensive line alone.
True. I mean, again, it should be, a caveat should be here. I mean, these are not all top round picks. I mean, right now, there's only really one possible first rounder, maybe 2 at the most. And most of these are mid to late round picks. But still, I mean,
would you see the 2 as Chris Jenkins and JJ McCarthy?
Yes. I mean, probably if if JJ ends up being, declaring early, that would be but yeah, definitely Chris Jenkins he's kind of the top guy. And then like after that, it's like, third rounder types, which would be Blake Corum, which he has a third down draft grade right now from one of the major scouting services. So third round, I should say, not third down. Anyway, but yeah, so, but yeah, so yeah, I think that speaks to the depth of Michigan's roster, and depth is what separates the best teams from the kind of second tier teams at the college football level.
Yeah, and there's all the future reasons, right, that you and I have talked about off air for why this year is so important, right? I mean, the Big Ten is expanding, so what is that going to look like? It's probably not getting easier. This is the end of, or nearing the end of the COVID year, the COVID year, right? So you're not going to have those fifth year, sixth year guys, right, quite that same level of flexibility. So you have really been able to perfectly construct your roster longer, bigger, more than you had in other times. And then there's this NCAA investigation looming, and whether it is based in merit or not, it is still in the ether. And that is something that must be explained to all recruits and to keep that pipeline going, right? And if you don't know if Jim is coming back or not, and I mean, he has not said he's leaving. He's never going to say he leaves until he is gone. But there's just no certainty about what's going to happen. And then you look at this roster, right? I mean, so I think a fun exercise, when you and I were debating how to break down this first podcast, one of the things we talked about was, what if we each did our own take on like the 5 most important players? We each, I mean, I was in one argument, I could make the argument that Blake Corum is not on that list. And I'm not saying he's not one of the 5 most talented, but most important. You were going to maybe list him as 1 or 2. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, right. No, I think he is.
Certainly high up. And the point is, we can have that level of discussion. I could make, I mean, maybe a lot of people would disagree with me. Could make, I think, a reasonably nuanced argument that Michigan's first unanimous All-American running back in 75 years is not on their handful of top most important players. That's the level of talent and depth that we're talking about with this program. And that's why there is no reason they cannot win it this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything it points to that. Again, with the Big Ten expanding in 2024, the schedule is going to get much tougher. I think it already, at least the first iteration of that schedule, although now it's subject to change since Oregon and Washington have added, looked very tough and not much tougher than what the schedule is now. So, I mean, Michigan might only face one ranked opponent before it gets to Ohio State this year. I mean, it's a pretty clear path. The Penn State game, obviously, on the road is, the big one. And maybe Maryland, because, I mean, it's kind of sneaky. It's a pretty good team. They're in between Penn State and Ohio State, and you just don't know. But, I mean, the schedule is not very challenging at all. I mean, the home schedule certainly is a bunch of duds up until Ohio State. I mean, I feel bad if I were a Michigan fan, in that sense, because, I mean, there's really not many sexy matchups there. So, I mean, given the schedule and the amount of talent that Michigan has and the uncertainty of what lies ahead, I mean, you really have to focus on this season as being the one where Michigan really has to, seize the moment. It's definitely, in my opinion, it is championship or bust.
Yeah. And it's not to mention, Michigan is in the greater picture, in greater context of all of college football, right? If you look at the greater scope, Ohio State sort of cycling down or breaking quarterback. Georgia, Alabama, Clemson.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the programs who have won national championship, I mean, those are all still top 5 teams, but they're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Those are going to be top tier, top flight programs. Of course, they get 4 and 5 star guys. LSU is in that mix. Florida State is now rising, but no one has the combination of experience and depth in the nation that Michigan has this year. They just, I mean, Georgia has had 25 players drafted in 2 years. Like, eventually there's drop off.
No, they still. I mean, they still have. Again, they have another way because they recruit so well. The question is, again, the quarterback. Is he going to be, able to handle all the stiff tests throughout the SEC, because it's a grind in that conference just as it is in the Big Ten. The fact that Michigan does have J.J. McCarthy is, a big, separator for them, from the rest of these programs that are kind of uncertain about it. Again, the USC also has that benefit with Caleb Williams coming back, but I mean, and LSU.
But they don't have anyone on defense who can tackle.
And LSU, yeah, exactly, and LSU with Jaden Daniels, and they could be a dark horse national title contender too. But Michigan, based on its roster, the quarterback that they have, the way that they've won, the formula that they've reestablished in the last 2 years, I mean, you would think that Michigan has as good a shot as any to take it home this year.
Yeah, no, and they do, but it's just, I don't know if unfortunate is the word, but maybe it is. Too bad that we don't see a way they get tested in any real way, shape, or form until week 5, maybe. I mean, maybe week 4, Rutgers, there's a little bit of something there. I'm trying to spin it. I doubt it. I don't see any of the first 4 games being within 35 points. And so I say that just because what has me thinking of that is you mentioned LSU, Florida State. They play each other week 1. I mean, they are 10 days away from playing each other. One of them is going to have the inside track to a college football playoff
right
in 11 days. I guess they're actually on Sunday night of week 1. But, I mean, but then again, there's just no incentive for Michigan to have done that this year, right? They're going to be, it looks like they're going to be 9-0 or going into Penn State. And there was not a lot to be gained from a different, like making the schedule all that much harder in the non-conference. But
I mean, obviously they couldn't have predicted though the team was going to look like this when they made the schedule. I mean, a lot of these games are ironed out and agreed upon many years in advance, so you just don't know. Again, I mean, is it going to be held against them again if they have one loss? Should they trip up somewhere? Possibly, yeah. I mean, that was the argument last year. So, I mean, it's Michigan though ran the table in the regular season, so they didn't have to worry about it. But I mean, if they have one loss, I mean, it's going to become an issue, the schedule, because again, the committee is going to look at, well, I mean, in the one test you had, you failed. So, yeah, I mean, it reduces the margin for error just as it did last year.
It does. But then again, it reduces the margin for error. I'm trying to think of a clever way to say this in live time, but there's also less margin for error on the other end because there's going to be less error. You know what I mean?
Well, it's just going to make the path easier. Is what it does. It makes the path easier, but it also reduces the margin for error. So, I mean, you can look at it, in 2 different ways. I mean, and but it's the same idea. Is that the goal is obviously to get to the CFP. But, you just have to take care of your own business or else, you might not make it. And so that's why it is, again, it's championship or bust. I mean, it would probably be a failure if they didn't get to the college football playoff this year.
Yeah. What would it be that trips this team up?
I mean, it could be the special team. It could be kicking game. I mean, you never know. I mean, Jake Moody, again, saved the day against Illinois. I mean, you have sometimes these performances that you don't expect, or, maybe some team introduces a different wrinkle from a defensive standpoint that, is challenging for Michigan to figure out. And so a game becomes a slog when it, most expected it to be a runaway. And that's where, again, special teams comes into play. Now, Michigan's had great special teams the last couple of years with, whether it was Brad Robbins with the punting and being able to flip field position and then Jake Moody with the field goal kicking. This year, I mean, that's a little bit of an unknown. So, I mean, those things could, potentially happen. I mean, again, who was expecting Michigan to really have to sweat it out against Illinois last year?
Right. No, it's a good point. Well, I think we were. For the record, I think both you and I were. It looked like, I mean, Illinois was playing pretty well. It was a clear trap game. I mean, we didn't know Blake Corum was going to get hurt and all those things, but like, we can look back. I probably picked Michigan win by 17 or something, not
I don't
2.
know. I don't know. I mean, Illinois just lost to Michigan State. Again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had.
And so I mean, like they were on the downswing when that game happened,
That's right.
and so like you just don't know. I mean, again, college football is weird. That's why people love it week to week, because you're looking for those kind of crazy moments. I mean, whereas the NFL is, every team can win. It's more surprising when an Illinois can challenge Michigan in a season like that one.
Yeah, and I think but just to cycle back to that special teams point you made, which is a good one. I mean, there are so few holes on this team. The ones that keep coming up are sort of the same, right? Who's going to play corner opposite Will Johnson?
Right.
Making sure that they have 4 tackles they like, but just getting that right combination of tackle squared away. But
also injuries. Injuries.
QB too.
Injuries are also important. Yeah. I mean, if should JJ McCarthy get hurt, which you hope obviously that does not happen, but like that's all bets are off at Michigan. I mean, it's like it really it begins and ends with JJ McCarthy, and so whether he can stay healthy is an extremely critical part. But also, I mean, again, any injury. Michigan's has benefited from the fact that they really haven't had many huge injuries. Obviously, the Corum one being at the end but they had Donovan Edwards right there behind them to be able to pick up the slack. Now, again, these things can derail a season. Any season is injuries. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's true for every team in America, right? So
right,
I'm trying to go
right.
So Michigan, and not just college. I mean, NFL too. You lose your starting quarterback. Short of Nick Foles with the Eagles, right? I mean, 99 times out of 100, you're not winning the Super Bowl, the championship, what have you. So
Georgia last year, I think could have Stetson Bennett got hurt.
Ohio State was on their third string quarterback.
Yeah, Carson Beck could probably have come in, and I mean, he looked pretty darn good in the the national championship. Obviously, that game was over, after the first 3 series or whatever. But but still, I mean, I think that there are certain programs where they could absorb the loss of their starting quarterback. I don't think Michigan is one of them right now.
But that's because quarterback is the only spot on Michigan's roster that they are not 2D strong, like strong. You could argue, I could argue, at almost every other position on the roster, that second person is arguably the same as whoever's in front of him. Now, that's not true with Will Johnson at corner. It's not true with Chris Jenkins, with Zach Zinter. There are those 3 to 5 best players, but like last year, there was no one who could fill in for Junior Colson or Michael Barrett, right? Ernest Hausman is right there. And it's depending how they want to work him in at linebacker. The entire offensive line. I mean, if you go through the second string offensive line, could you make the argument that's a top 3 offensive line in the Big Ten? And that's guys 6 through 10. So yes, Michigan does not have that, but it's not like they don't have the depth everywhere. They are in an unfortunate position. The one spot they don't have the requisite depth is the most important position on the field. But they have the guy at the top who is capable of leading them all the way.
Strangely enough, they did have the depth last year. Technically, obviously before Cade got hurt. But even with Alan Bowman, I mean, they had, a player that may be able to. I mean, that had already shown he can compete at the Power 5 level. It is interesting though that that is a very as it relates to how JJ plans to play the season. What he's talked about wanting to run the ball more. But he has to be very, very circumspect in how he does that, and same with Michigan and how they choose to run him. Because that is obviously a dimension to his game. But given the fact that they don't have the depth at quarterback, that kind of similar level starter type player available, it's a question they're going to have to consider, and a situation they're going to have to navigate throughout the year.
They're not going to let him get hit in the non-conference. they will say under any circumstance, you are not allowed, short of a sack, short of a sack that is unavoidable. Yeah. You are not allowed to have a defender make contact with your body. You run out of bounds or you slide, period. That's where it starts. If you take a hit, you're pulled. You're out of the game for a game. You are too important. You cannot get touched unless, right? That's actually how I'm treating it. Like, you don't need to go run for 30 yards. Like, just slide. It's UNLV. Just slide. Just be healthy. Those are my thoughts on it.
No, I agree. And I think, again, there's so much depending on, him surviving the season and, maintaining his health throughout the year. Otherwise, again, their national championship hopes are, take a very big hit, no pun intended, with if McCarthy somehow also takes a big hit and, is out for a while. Yeah.
Yes. But all right, everyone. Rainer will be here till Thursday with the comedy. So okay. That's going to do it for segment 2. I was curious to see how in lockstep we would be or differ on just sort of the expectation, the perception, and everything around Michigan. So there's only one last thing to do. As I said, we're workshopping the name, Stadium in Maine, but the emphasis of the matter, the point of the matter, is we're going to talk about just some rumblings we heard on Stadium in Maine, and that was a couple of announcements, and we'll get that to you after the break. Stay tuned. You're listening to Hail Yes. Welcome back to Hail Yes. All right, Rainer. Part 3. That's what I'm calling it now. The final segment. Rumblings on Stadium in Maine. What have you? There were a couple announcements earlier this week that I thought looked cool. That I had some thoughts about the reaction to. And that was Michigan's social teams put out sort of a teaser video showing off their new LED lights at the stadium. And I believe it was a couple hours after that, perhaps it was before, they were within a couple hours of each other. The university had announced a partnership to work with Peleton, the fitness, but it's most known for its bike. It's a fitness partner of the university now. Michigan is the first partner university collegiate brand to partner with Peleton. What did you think of all of this?
Well, I thought the Peleton announcement was rather ironic considering the NCAA investigation going on with, that having taken place during COVID-19 and the Peleton bike mostly being associated with COVID-19. The fact that, it was, very popular there then and, working out from home was kind of the deal during that period. So there was a bit of irony there. I am not going to lie. I kind of laughed at that.
I agree. So that irony was lost on me. I actually didn't. That didn't even occur to me, although it is funny. The first thing I thought was I was really surprised by how excited everyone got. Now, so when I saw the video, the lights video on that Michigan put out, I even sent a tweet or an X or whatever it's called. I was like, all right, these lights look pretty cool, right? Like. I'm finally looking. I was dreading. That a Bowling Green night game. Sorry, it's just not. Newsflash to everyone who does not work these games: people working the games do not want night games, and they certainly don't want night games against MAC teams that they're going to beat. That is going to be a 50-point game. However, now I'm a little more excited for it. So that was my thought about the lights. As for the Peleton, people are aware that. The university's not like handing out Pelotons, right? Like they're going to be on the sidelines and the athletes are going to get NIL deals to help promote it. Now, I'm not trying to like potty in anybody's Cheerios. It's cool. It's groundbreaking. Michigan always does these things. They like to be cutting edge. But did you see like a lot of people are like, oh my God, like the Peleton, like it was just all over my feed. And I was like, all they did is make a black bike Mason blue. I see you getting excited about the lights because like that's more interactive and for the fans like to look cool. A Peleton is just sitting on the sideline, like, and it's replacing a different bike. Like, is it that exciting?
I don't know. The whole Peleton phenomenon has always been bizarre to me. But going back to that lights thing, that's also kind of a weird situation for me because I grew up when you're watching college football. I mean, Michigan was always associated with noon and 3:30 kickoff. So why would they even need lights? And so like it's become a thing where, again, Michigan, well, obviously they would have lights towards the end of the season because of the game getting, or, the time getting dark or whatever, during that period of the fall. But still, it was not something you associated with Michigan football was night games. And so it's just a kind of a reminder of where we are now in college football, where you're having November kickoffs at night and you're having more of these night games than you used to have with Michigan. Again, Michigan was exclusively a 12 and 3:30 team. This was not SEC where, you had night games all the time, going back even, prior to this whole TV revolution. So it's rather interesting that, this is kind of a sign of the times.
Yeah, I was just about to say how proud I was of you for not going SEC elitist on us, because as we know, Rainer covered Alabama before Michigan, and Alabama has had LED lights for a number of years. So I was waiting for you to say, oh, I mean, this is what we did in the SEC. This is how the SEC does it. It's about time.
Well, no, I mean, but it's true. I mean, Alabama made it a big deal when they added the LED lights. Again, that's also, they bucking tradition in their way of, you don't associate Alabama with, a disco situation going on, a club setting, kind of, play. But, again, same with Michigan. Yeah, like, waiting for the beat, the bass to drop. I mean, so, I mean, it's not something, the club experience is not something you would associate with traditional college football. All of this is a sign of the times of where we are. I mean, where they want to create more interactive fan experience, and they have to find a way to entertain people of this generation beyond just the football. And so that's what, I mean, again, Michigan's had a DJ for a while, and so all of this stuff is, kind of, a point where college football is really trying to get to, where they go beyond just the football aspect. That is really what brought a lot of people in, especially from previous generations.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you got to do it because the at-home experience is just so good. I know, Rainer, we've had these conversations sitting in the press box, like during some, not to separate from the fan just momentarily. I mean, we are like, dude, it's cold and like not nice outside. Like I would not, if I was not sheltered, like I would not be sitting here for 4 hours. You know what I mean? And so they have to continue to try to, with the prices, with the lines, with the weather, and then you compare it to, and the bathrooms, everything, right? The at-home experience is so good. They're trying to do anything they can. This is not just Michigan, right? This is far from just Michigan. This is every sport, every level. Like if you look at the Atlanta Falcons, they've been doing it for a number of years. Concession prices are like, I saw a picture of what you can get for $20. Oh my God, you can barely get it for $20 at the grocery store. It's a piece of pizza, a hot dog, a pretzel, and some cheese, a soft drink, and like popcorn, all in one picture for $20, right? So it's all about just trying to get. Michigan doesn't have trouble getting people in the door, but making it enjoyable.
The light show might be the most entertaining thing you see in a home game up until Ohio State. The way the schedule plays out for the, so maybe they're trying to take people's eyes off the ball, so to speak, with as it relates to the football, because again, a lot of these games will be over before halftime.
Right. It's like the Super Bowl, right? Like you're not just paying for the game, it's an experience.
Yeah.
Michigan is now selling, well, this football game is actually not quite worth the $120 ticket, but we have some very nice, large, big screens that you can see it on. Those screens are awesome. People are going to love it. Right. When we got to tour, those, they're pretty good. So, all right. I think that's a good place to leave this. And what I will also say about the segment is, please send ideas in, right? Like this is supposed to be a sort of an interactive, fun idea. If people see things on the message board, if you have mailbag questions, right, Rainer? Whatever people want to know, but send it our way. And then hopefully that will be what we discuss, easy for me to say, discuss in this section of the pod. Okay, Rainer, I thought you were going to be like, yeah. No, I thought you were going to be like, absolutely, yeah, send him on in. Yeah. But okay, Reiner's the new I said it so perfectly. He had nothing to add. Is that right?
This is like Penn and Teller. I don't say anything. Yeah.
All right.
I just nod.
Okay. We almost, yes, and everyone in this audio only medium can see you nodding along. Very good. Exactly. All right. We almost made it through without a total train wreck. But so thanks again, everybody, for listening. And while I'm thanking them, we got to thank the people who made this possible. Executive editor Anjanette Delgado, sports editor Kirkland Crawford, audio engineer Robin Chan, producer and editor, my main man, Andrew Burkle, behind the scenes, who we did not get on today as we are continuing to shape the form of this podcast, but you will hear from him and he will help us sort of keep this thing going. He's a sports guy as well, one of the newer editors, doing a great job on our staff. And of course, editor-in-chief Nicole Avery-Nichols. So as always, you can download this podcast on Freep.com, Apple Pod, Spotify, Google Pod, pretty much anywhere you go for all of these things. We will soon be on YouTube. And I know you've heard this all a million times, but please leave a 5-star review. It will actually make my life better. It's really that simple. And when you do, as I'm calling for these mailbag things, send a screenshot of it on Twitter, X, social media, and I will see what I can do as far as potentially maybe some sort of giveaway when we reach X amount of subscribers. Now, that is not Gannett endorsed. I'm speaking for myself, but I will see what we can do on that front down the line. I know Reiner's continuing to nod along. That means he's in agreement with everything I say. So until then, the next time you will hear from us will be week 1, and Eastern Carolina will be on the clock. The Fighting Mike Houston's, that means you. All right, for next time, this is Hail Yes.